Hello. I am late and I apologize for anyone who had this on their calendar. I had a couple people tell me, let me get started on Instagram. I had a couple people tell me that they've, scheduled on their calendars at like when I go live. So I apologize for like being late, but I have been a little bit off my game. I am been sick, a little under the weather, but I am feeling better. I feel like it's coming back around. I got like hot earlier, which is why I'm wearing, no sleeves. And it's 40 degrees outside here today. But thank you. It is Friday. So this is how to align with transformation. I'm gonna give it a minute to see if people want to join, but I'm completely okay with talking to myself. Part of being a therapist, I guess. I also want to take a moment to thank everyone. I've been having a lot more followers come in, and I'm at a phase right now where that is the goal. Like I am trying to bring in more people since I'm, positioning myself to go and put myself out there more on social media. So I just want to take a moment to thank you guys for your interest in wanting to improve your mental health. What my purpose and my goal is really is to build a therapeutic style community. We as human beings right now, I use the word inflamed with a lot of my clients, and what I am seeing a lot is like we're very inflamed right now as a society, and there's a lot of what goes into that from my clinical perspective, being a clinical social worker in addictions therapist. I know a lot about what people are going through, like on the back end. So I know people are struggling on top of just being like, we're about to be on year 3 of COVID, like, and we're getting to a point where post COVID life, what does that look like, right? So but ultimately I'm not going to go into that quite today. I can talk a lot about that, but um I think really just what my message today for how to align with transformation is, hey Cornelius, it's like, oh, Sarah's here. I'm like, it's my assistant, but I'm gonna wave at you too. Is meaning. How do you find meaning in all the chaos? And that's a tough one, right? Because a lot of what meaning that we find during these times is it's going to reflect what we're going through. So I'm going to kind of just speak briefly a little bit about like how do you find meaning when the shit's going to shit. Like there's like no other way to describe it when people are this agitated. Like I don't know if you guys ever are driving and you notice that like there's just a person like who's excessively trying, like they have somewhere to be, and it's not behind you, it's around you, in front of you, and like way ahead of you, and it's just they seem like so in a rush. And for me, what that tells me is they have someplace more to be, like they have a sense of urgency that I'm not gonna fight with them. Like I'm gonna get out of the way. I'm not gonna let their urgency activate mine. And that is part of finding meaning. So when I say how do you find meaning, it's not just painting things in a pretty picture of like, oh, let's find the positive, because I'm actually a really big proponent of like toxic positivity. Like there's no, not everything in life is positive. We cannot just put a positive spin on everything. But if you can find the meaning of how you're presented with these challenges, then you're able to really find balance of like respecting the space that needs to be held for the trials and the tribulations of life, and the lessons that you're presented in life, and you're able to get through those by finding not only just the positive but accepting the negative. And you can really you sometimes that will make your focus go towards the things that you can control. Sometimes that will present like things that you can actually put action towards, and that you can find even more meaning. So as an example, what I was saying is, watching how people are moving these days is really how you can truly find the meaning. Another example, and this kind of hit me last night actually, and this is why I kind of wanted to talk about meaning today, is because a lot of what I and when I meet with my clients, they are going through certain things, but a lot of them it's because they relate to some of the things that I've been through. So I've been sick, right? This is one of the first times that I have been sick in a while. When I changed my lifestyle like 4 years ago, um, I really like I got my stress levels under control. That is the biggest culprit for illness and your immune system is stress. And I started eating cleaner. I got sugar, processed sugar, predominantly out of my the foods that I was eating, and I just was able to really free up a lot of like that system being clogged. um, and my immune system benefited completely. And I hadn't really had like a common cold, any kind of rundown, like at all for like the last 3 to 4 years. And then, I mean, COVID got me. I'm not gonna lie. And COVID is a different kind of beast. Since it's a virus, it can infiltrate an immune system regardless of how like healthy you are. That's why it's been so scary, right? But recently I put my program to the test a few years ago, and I made some moves in my life to be able to see if I could take things to the next level, and in a lot of ways I could, but they didn't work out at the same time too, so it did end up causing a lot of stress, and that's where I've had to and then I moved. That's a big stressor. So if you ever get a chance to go look up the big five stressors, like those, what research shows provide the most stress in our lives and the impact. Moving's one of them, a loss of a family member, divorce, starting a new job, anything that has like and can imply transition. All of that brings stress, and there's some good stress, and there's intentional stress that you should put yourself under as like practice for your body to go through that. But then there's just stress that you want to reduce in all capacity. And there's some things that you just can't avoid. You can't avoid certain stressors in life. Can't avoid recessions. So I say all that to say, what hit me last night was I'd seen this video actually about a recession. And for all the people who follow like crypto traders and inspirational people, it's the kind of a common saying is recessions are where millionaires are made. And I truly believe that, and how I related to it, and I found meaning for that for me right now, was because I've actually had to, because of the stress that I've been going through, I've had to kind of pull back on some things. I put some limitations on the things that I was going to purchase unless they were absolutely necessary. I'm having to kind of re train my focus to be needs versus wants, long term versus short term. And then I realized, I was like, yo, being sick is also one of those places where I have all the attention back on me. It's one of those like kind of physically recessive periods of time where all the focus has to go in to taking care of myself, pouring back into me, whether that's decreasing stress. And people actually understand that when you tell them, like, yo, I'm under the weather, they're like, okay, cool, she's sick. Timeline gets moved. Things start to happen just because you acknowledge, like, yeah, I'm not in my best place right now. And you start to conserve. You start to conserve energy because you have no choice but to pay attention to you feeling better. And the meaning of me being sick, because it bugs me. I'm not gonna lie. I labeled myself as like a notoriously horrible patient. I don't like to be sick. It makes me feel like I'm not in control. I can't do the things that I haven't been in the gym for almost a week, And I also like, because I don't like the idea of like thinking that I'm leaving, germs. Like there's plenty of other people who can, go to the gym while they're being sick. I have that conscience will eat me alive. Like I don't want to be that person that like knowingly gets other people sick. And before I knew, like, it's not COVID, by the way. I just got run down. And but I like reduce my exposure to people, right? So the meaning of this really truly in my life is like if I can get through this sickness and I can start taking care of myself and I can rebalance how I balance my limitations. I also had to focus on getting sugar out of my diet. Trust me, like I was buying those cookies again because I love cookies and I love sugar. Like that's the only reason I did this whole transformation was for me to eat sugar again, but with the responsibility that it is going to wreak havoc on my immune system. Can we prepare for recessions by our behaviors and spend? Absolutely. I like that question, but I would be, the first thing that comes to my mind here is like, because to kind of align with what I was talking about with stress and finding the meaning of that stress is make sure that you're not pulling back in preparation for a recession out of fear. Because the thing about a recession is that and I'm not an economist, I'm not a specialist in this, but how I make sense of a recession is that people are pulling back and it's affecting the economy because of the ultimately like the boom and probably in a representation of like good stress that our economy had, but then also like people don't now have a light, they're not going to be spending as much because of what they were spending before. And so making sure that when you're cutting back, you're not going into a place of scarcity, because this is where a lot of people get stuck in that cycle of not being sustainable, because you're not realizing, we're not realizing that we're creating stress on the back end of being stressed because we're not either dealing with it within our bodies, or we're not seeing the scarcity and that stress that comes from like we don't have enough. A recession does not mean that you're not going to have enough, but if you ignite your own fear of like I'm not going to have enough, you're going to create stress, and sometimes we miss that. And that's where therapy a lot of the times can help. With therapy is really just having like a bird's eye view of how stress manifests in your life, because we can't have like, if I don't know about y'all, but if you're a provider, you usually have this sense of like not many people have your back, right? You may have people who have your back, but they also have like other people's backs. And therapy can really be that place where you go and you have someone who is supposed to be kind of watching your six at all times. So in that way, you don't have like this stressor of maybe just inefficient way of thinking about money, or a fear response that you didn't really know that was causing that much havoc, or wreaking that much havoc on your life, right? So, of course, one of the purposes in my life is I'm trying to break the stigma of therapy. But there's also like getting to a place of being preventative with not only just your mental health, but with all the different aspects of wellness, is really important to be able to form your ability to manage stress. And if I'm going to tie this back into like meaning, I hope y'all are following me here because my mind can get pretty expansive pretty quickly. And is that if you are in a state of stress and you're ignoring it and you are in denial, I literally unlocked a level of denial probably like a month ago that I was like, ooh, I didn't see that one. I journal a lot, that helps. But if you are in a state of stress, your finding meaning is going to be very challenging, because you're going to be presented with like, well, what the frig is positive about that? Like, oh, here's another example. I may have a gas leak. I'm like, what's the positive thing about, like, there's nothing really positive about a gas leak. But it literally forced me to get outside. I didn't leave my house yesterday, like, because I had a lot of clients, and I really needed to go outside. If I wasn't paying attention to like where's the meaning in something of this stress, then I would miss it. I would become irritated. I would literally be harboring my own stress and limiting my ability to find meaning in other places, limiting my ability to find meaning for other people as well. And because I'm a provider and I have to be that person for people, I have to be very cautious about how I harbor stress. Um, so yeah, that is kind of that's what was on my brain is of like, there's meaning in everything. And it is challenging to experience the oppression experience, whether it's mental illness. I consider mental health to just be like that long-term exposure to oppressive dynamics, whether that be in our relationships, whether that be with ourselves. I'd be oppressing myself all the damn time. Like that's where restrictive behaviors can stem from. But it's like if we're or like relationships, whether they're significant others or even friendships, if we are in a place where we believe someone else's way is better than us and it makes us feel less than, that can be oppressive. So the longer that we're exposed to those dynamics, the more mental and emotional backlog we're going to have. That's what I see mental illness as. And if that, after you have enough clutter, it becomes overwhelming and you really are um, temporarily incapable. I want to be mindful about how I label people's capability when you're not ever incapable of anything. But when you start to have a backlog of unhealthy emotions or oppressive dynamics and scenarios, the ability to make change becomes more challenging because you are now up against your body, your hormonal imbalances, you're up against still true power dynamics within wherever those oppressive dynamics are coming from. I just got cold. I just realized I got cold. So that's what, like, when we're on autopilot, I'm sitting here talking. I didn't realize. I was like, it's probably time. You can look. I can even see it on my arms. That's where I have a very sensitive, like red-based skin. When we are on autopilot, because the way the brain works and protects us when we're under and in distress is that it's like, all right, we're just going to tune out autopilot. That's what dissociation, if you have heard that word before, dissociation is kind of like, is your brain's coping skill to just be like, I don't want to handle this. Sure. You can get home. It's that feeling if you guys ever driven home and you like missed maybe like three minutes of your time. You're like, oh, I got home, but I don't really remember how I got here. Dissociation, like that usually happens when we're stressed, tired. For me, it happens when I'm hungry. Like if I don't be thinking, like it just our systems go haywire, and that is why meaning for a lot of people, I think, gets limited. So I hope this message, maybe, I guess my purpose, what do I want you to take away from this if you've made it this far through? One, if you could also, if you ever comment on this, if you get through this whole thing, hashtag replay, or if you were here live, I know who's here live, but, if you guys watch this after, just hashtag comment replay, because then that tells me, like, okay, people were here, and then also it can help me engage better more with you. And but I really want the takeaway to be like, if you're not able to find the meaning of why things are happening to you, and you feel like it's like, oh, why me? Oh, and you just keep getting further and further like pushed down, please reach out to me. If I'm not going to be your therapist, then I will find someone. It doesn't even necessarily have to be therapy, but you cannot go through that feeling with expecting there to be a different outcome if you don't do something different. And you may need someone's, and this may be in physical symptoms. This is where like mental health gets a little tricky because our symptoms look very different. Stress manifests very different for people, just like um, depression manifests very differently from like men and women. Hey there, Miss Bethany. And so if you're going through that like more oppressive time and feeling, it's not like when I say go to therapy, it's not because there's anything wrong with you. It's because you cannot do that by yourself. Even if you have a partner, your significant other is not supposed to be and or know how to help you through that. There may be things that you don't know, whether that be certain resources that you can use or tools or coping skills that you can use. Um, but I really, yeah, just it's make sure you pay attention that if you're not finding meaning in your life of why, like, okay, this stressor is happening because I really need a wake up call to get my ass out the house. Because that was mine the other, like when I was like, oh, I may have a gas leak. Let me step out. Let me get a breath of fresh air, and let me go back in to see if I actually am smelling what I'm smelling. Um, being like, and just kind of recapping, like being sick. What is the meaning there? Oh, it means that I actually need to pay attention to taking care of myself. Maybe knowing my own limit a little bit and respecting. Actually, no, I knew my limit. I didn't respect my limit. And that has been a complete blaring message to me these recent days as I've been successful in understanding a lot of those messages before, but they look very different now that I have released myself from this much weight, and they are not necessarily going to look the same and they may not mean the same thing. That's where like I made a video the other the other week about life is about interpretation. And how you interpret that information, if it's coming at you and you're interpreting it that you are a bad person, that you're worthless, that you are not meant to be on this world, that no, that is no, that messaging is not supposed to be happening. And that's exactly why there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that that interpretation is not getting you the outcome, and it's not providing positive consequence. It's providing negative consequence. And that is why therapy exists. We do not want people in this world to think that they are less than or worthless because of the way that they just because they feel that way. And feelings are very real experiences, but they're also not the facts that we need to base our decisions off of and build our foundations on. So if you're really looking to look for sustainable change and put out in the world that and like create a life of and align with transformation, start with finding a community. It can be mine. I can help you find someone else because I don't anticipate to be able to relate to everyone. I'm a white female. That from like not everyone is going to relate to me. I know there will be some people, but that may not go the distance. But I know people who you can relate to, so you can get very similar messages about how to create change in your life and actually feel better, so therefore you can do better things for your life, and you don't have to have that constant feeling of being like, oh my gosh, this I'm not going to be able to do this, I'm not doing, and all of that. We are just that. As therapy, we are that place for you to come and be able to kind of unpack that, reposition it, get it working for you and not working against you. So that's what I got for meaning today. So I really hope that this message reaches someone. So I just realized too that none of my branding and streaming stuff, I think my assistant came in and was like, oh, well, let's fix this, was on. But make sure you guys follow me. I am on YouTube now. I am on Facebook, whether it be my Sarah Wilder Facebook or the Right Size Perspective. And what else do I got? YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I am technically on LinkedIn, but I have not broadened my scope to updating that quite yet, just because I want to make sure I've got things a little bit more in place. And yeah, I will have all of this content there for you. Any support that you're willing to provide would help, but it's not expected. But I will be launching some cool stuff soon to kind of be able to, to rebuild what I've my purpose, which was getting right size perspective and making therapy accessible for people, and building a therapeutic community for people to be able to improve their lives in the way that they need to. Because the thing about how I needed to align with transformation, I'm going to try to keep this a short tangent, but I couldn't, where I was back then, I wasn't in a place to financially just make one big investment on hiring a coach. I wasn't able to make one full investment on just being all in on myself. I had built a foundation that was pretty scattered. And to be honest with you, I'm still kind of dealing with a little bit today, up to this day. Not actively, but just in how, like, a lot of it's another conversation for another time. But make sure that when you pay attention to that desire that you do have to want something different. And the reason I'm kind of like putting my community out there as the main point is because I designed it around the version of myself that I was when I started. And the version of myself that I was when I started, I know, is a very realistic concept for a lot of people, because I would have qualified and did qualify for a lot of the diagnoses that are in this lovely little, this is not the actual DSM, but this is the mini one. And there's a lot bigger one. But yeah, I saw myself in this. And I was like, yeah, no, there's another way. Like, I can learn how to do things differently. And so when I'm building this therapeutic community, I'm basing it off of how I needed to learn at the place that I was. And for people who are in those places still, my goal is to expedite the process as much as possible. Because the thing about growth is that you have to go through what you have to go through, and everyone has to go through something different. So I'm trying to make it very accessible in general for people to apply for themselves at their speed, because not everyone is going to be able to go at the same rate, but it is still all important, and it has meaning for the time that you receive what those messages are. Because that's truly gotten to a point of growth in my life where spiritually I realize I don't have any control, and this message is going to reach someone when it needs to reach them, and it will be there for them when it needs to be there, and the timeline is completely out of our control. So hope that message made sense for everyone. Please follow us. And yeah, I'm excited to see what comes from all the things in my mind, because probably the hardest part is trying to get them out and making sure they make sense for everyone. But it's fun at the same time too. And I look forward to connecting with everyone who finds it relatable. So have a good Friday. Enjoy your weekend. I'm going to be spending some of my time recuperating still, and because then I've got lots of things that I want to do. So have a good time.